Hi guys, welcome. And who dat? I'm Joe, and today I'm going to present a video. Our beloved Bless You Boys in black and gold, the New Orleans Saints versus the NFC South rookies. We're going to take a look at the rookies that our NFC South opponents have drafted, and the ones in particular that I'm concerned with. Not so much concerned with, just taking notice of. And these players were players that I was pretty high on in the draft, and it happens every year. I single out players that I like in the draft, and I watch our division rivals draft them one after the other after the other. It happens every year, and this year is no different. So first we're going to take a look at the defending NFC South champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They grabbed 7 players, and I'm going to highlight 3 that I liked before the draft and that the Buccaneers managed to snag. And we're going to start with running back Bucky Irving out of Oregon. Tampa Bay selects him in the 4th round. That's right around the area where I said Irving was worth taking. I think out of the top 5 backs that I was looking at, Irving was definitely the last one. I think that there's potential there, but I also think he has a lot of work that he needs to do to be a complete back. And we're going to get to watch him play for the Buccaneers, and we're going to see if he can handle the NFL. Like I said, he was at the bottom of my list, and I mean, it would have been we would have had to have multiple draft picks. 12 for me to consider drafting Irving. But if we would have had 12 picks, I would have taken Irving in the 4th round. And that's where the Bucs got him. So we'll see. I don't know if Irving's good enough to crack the starting lineup or not, but we'll see enough of him twice a year. All right, the second player that I'm worried about that the Buccaneers grab is safety Tyke Smith out of Georgia. He was on my very short list. Cole Bishop and Tyke Smith. That was my favorite 2 safeties in the draft. I wanted to get Tyke for ourselves. I thought he would make a great nickel quarterback. And the Buccaneers drafted him in the 3rd round. Tyke Smith out of Georgia, I think, is going to be a hell of a player. And, yeah, we get to play him twice a year now. Great. So I'm not sure if the Buccaneers plan on utilizing Tyke Smith the way I would have had he been drafted by the Saints. But, yeah, he would have been our nickel corner. And he would have been some good youth and depth at safety. Now we get to play him twice a year against the Bucs. And the number 1 guy I'm worried about for the Bucs is their 1st round draft pick, offensive guard Barton out of Duke. He was my favorite guard in the draft if we weren't going to grab pure guard Christian Haynes. And, Barton can play tackle, guard, or center. So we'll see where the Bucs put him. If the Saints would have drafted him, we would have put him at left guard or left tackle. So the Bucs get him, and now our defensive line is going to have to beat this guy twice a year, and hopefully we can. I'm highlighting these 3 players, Barton, Tyke Smith, Bucky Irving, because I was high on them going into the draft. And we'll see if they turn out to be good players or not, and how the Bucs decide to utilize them. Let's take a look at the next team in our division. We're going to look at the Atlanta Falcons. That's right. The Dirty Birds, our cousins and, our dreaded rivals at the same time. Everyone's making fun of Atlanta because of their 1st round draft pick of Michael Penix Jr. Well, let's look at Penix Jr. Yeah, he was one of the best 6 quarterbacks in the draft, and if you were going to grab a quarterback, it was really up to you when you grab them. Those quarterbacks were coming off the board pretty quick. And I envisioned a scenario where Atlanta could trade down and still get a really good player in the 1st round and probably pick up Penix in the 2nd round. Not sure if that could have happened or not. Atlanta went ahead and grabbed them with the 8th overall pick. Everybody's upset. They think it's crazy because they just signed Kirk Cousins to a big deal. Well, I don't think the draft next year is going to be very good for quarterbacks. So if you're looking to grab a quarterback and you're staring at one in the draft and you think that he's better than anybody that may be projected even next year in the draft, then yeah, Penix is worth the pick. No one really looks at it that way, and that's the way I've looked at it. I'm not trying to justify their pick other than to say, I got to figure out a reason why they did it. And that was a good reason to do it. If your scouting department is good enough to know what college football is going to offer in the next couple of years, and I just as a fan have heard through looking into this draft that next year the draft class for quarterbacks is not going to be as good. And I didn't think it was that great this year. But there were definitely 6 players that you had to focus on as the best quarterbacks in this draft. So if next year's quarterback draft isn't going to be that good, then maybe a guy like Michael Penix or Bo Nix or even Michael Pratt or Spencer Rattler could be a way better quarterback than what you're going to see next year. I mean, that's just a way a scouting department could look at it. Another thing is the draft, it really is trying to grab the best talent when you can get it. People think that Penix could have been picked in the 2nd round. It would have been a better value, and I think it would have been a better value, but you just don't know where these quarterbacks were going to go. So you take your guy when you can get him. I don't fault the Falcons all that much for grabbing Penix. I would have grabbed Penix myself if we would have had a bunch of picks and he would have been there in the 2nd round. So as a player, I like Penix. I think he's a bit of a statue. I think that was a concern, and it's going to be a concern for the Falcons. So, yeah, Penix is an older player, and he may not see the field for 3 years, but if he remains healthy and he can get a 10 or 15-year quarterback career, you never know. The man could play till he's 38 or 40. You just don't know. So maybe the Falcons have their quarterback of the future, and Penix is a guy that we have to face twice a year for the next 15 years. You never know. I mean, after Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins for a couple of years, and then Penix after that. Something us Saints fans have to look at. As much as we're making fun of the Falcons, it all depends on how good Michael Penix is. It comes down to that. It really does. People think when you draft, it's supposed to help you fix your team that year, and it can, especially if you're really close. If you're 7-10 and you're trying to build a football team, then I can't fault you for grabbing who you grab when you grab, if these players turn out to be good. All right, the next one on the list for Atlanta that I'm worried about is Ruk Ororo out of Clemson, their 2nd-round draft pick. He was the 2nd defensive tackle taken off the boards. People think that was a reach. But other than that, Ororo's a great player, so I don't have an issue with it. As a matter of fact, he was very highly ranked on my list, and I would have liked to have him because of his versatility in the middle of the defensive line, his ability to play all 3 downs. So I think Ororo, even though you could have had Johnny Newton or Chris Jenkins, you grab Ororo, that's your guy. I liked him. We're going to have to see what happens. Now, the only issue I really have with the Falcons taking him, none at all, until the 3rd round when they took Braylon Trice, who was also a defensive lineman. Now, Trice is on the light side at the combine, but he played at like 270, 275 this past season. So I think Braylon Trice out of Washington, an edge rusher, he might end up being a linebacker for the Falcons. But if he does play on the defensive end, that's their 2nd defensive lineman. And then with their 4th-round pick, the next guy I'm going to highlight, the Falcons go ahead and grab Brandon Dorlus. Well, Brandon Dorlus is an edge rusher defensive end who can also play defensive tackle. So it's kind of like you got 3 similar guys in a row with Ororo and then Trice and then Dorlus. You know, you're trying to shore up your defensive line and you're getting different players, and one of them's going to fit. Well, maybe people think grabbing all 3 of those in the first 4 rounds, not to mention the quarterback, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to people. But Ororo and Brandon Dorlus were two players I was very high on. I thought Dorlus was a great piece to have for the Saints defensive line as an edge rusher and in kick inside, can play inside if he has to. If you're down a man, I think he's going to bring pass rush ability. My cat is on the desk. That's why the camera's moving, but I love him. So come get in my lap. I miss you, all right? Come see me. Yeah, it's my buddy. So I love Brandon Dorlus, and now we get to play him twice a year along with Ororo. So we'll see if these players turn out to be any good. You never know how a team utilizes a player and how their career ends up. But let's go on to the next one, and this is the last team from our division, the Carolina Panthers. They had themselves a decent draft, I think, out of all of the teams. And, Atlanta hit on a bunch of them that I really like with Dorlus and Ororo. I even liked Trice until the Combine. And then I dropped him as a want for our team. But Carolina really nailed it. Every single player Carolina drafted, I mocked to the Saints. Every single one Carolina drafted, I at one time mocked to the Saints. I see the value in all of Carolina's draft picks. And I got to say, I think they did a fine job. Moving into the first round to grab wide receiver Xavier Legette. Yeah, that's a guy that I wanted for the Saints. I drafted Xavier Legette in the second round to the Saints. Probably 20% of the mocks I've done. He was always there. He was always exactly what we needed, a big body. He could play the X. He could be a big slot. He had speed. He had good size. Carolina moves up and grabs him. Of course they did. That's what Carolina does. They grab players I love all the time. And I think as most Saints fans, if you were doing these mock drafts or if you knew about the draft, I know most of you Saints fans highlighted Legette as a potential for us. Now he's going to play with the Panthers for 2 years for his career. So if you thought he was a good player, now he's on the Panthers. You're kind of hoping he's a bad player, right? Well, I projected him to be a pretty decent player. So now we have to face him twice a year. And with the second round pick, the Panthers grabbed my favorite running back in the entire draft, a guy that I didn't even think the Saints would target because you would have to draft him so early. Carolina gets running back Jonathan Brooks out of Texas in the second round. Everybody kind of freaked out. He was the first running back off the board, and everybody thought, oh, no, is this too early? Well, yeah, those running backs are going to start coming off eventually. And if you want the best ones, you're going to have to grab them in the second round, and that's what the Panthers did. Kind of reminds me of when Detroit grabbed the running back early a couple of years ago, and everybody thought they were crazy. And I'm like, nah, the running back is a huge position of need for every team. You grab the right one, and you're pretty set. I mean, that's a large part of your offense for people to diss on the running back position as a high draft pick. I understand all of it. I can't fault the Panthers for grabbing this guy. He comes back from his injury and he looks as good as he did in college. And yeah, we're going to have us a tough SOB that we're going to have to defend twice a year, and we're going to have to contain if we're going to win our division. And even though, like I said, all of the Panthers draft picks this year were players I mocked to the Saints, I'm only highlighting 3 for every team in our division. And the third one I'm going to highlight is, of course, tight end Jatavian Sanders, another player out of Texas. I thought you'd have to get him in the second round. I thought if he was available in the third round, it would be a steal. And Carolina gets him with the first pick in the fourth round. The ultimate steal. And yeah, Jatavian Sanders isn't much of an inline blocker. Don't know if he's going to turn into a great every down tight end, your basic run-of-the-mill on-the-line tight end. But I love his potential for the Saints and what we could have used him as that H-back X type, split him out, all this stuff, X-factor type. So I love Jatavian Sanders. Now he's a Carolina Panther, and we're going to have to contain him twice a year. So yeah, that's my video. I thought it was interesting. I wanted to highlight the draft picks of all of our divisional foes, and especially the players that I was high on going into the draft that I wanted the Saints to get, and that now we have to face every year, twice a year. So that's my video, guys. I hope you liked it. Subscribe to Rosenfield 10 for more videos about the Saints and our NFC South divisional foes. And until the next one, I'll talk to you later. Who dat?